Hey folks, it's me, Mark Marin. Today's episode of the podcast is sponsored by Stamps.com. Stamps.com. You like to send things through the mail? Send them to Stamps.com. Okay, so today I sit down and I'm talking with someone who's unbelievably famous, and they always want to talk to me in the podcast, and I'm pretty ambivalent of doing that myself. So anyway, but before we get to that, this episode is brought to you by Stamps.com. Stamps.com is a place you get stamps. You send things out through the old-timey way, through the mails. You kids don't know. So anyway, last night I ate a lot of food and I'm feeling pretty depressed. And I did some stand-up and it was pretty weird. And I talked about some comedians that you don't know the names of, and you don't know them by face, but they're old timers, and I know them for a long time. But anyway, before I get to that, Stamps.com did this episode. They sponsored it. Got some stamps here. Sometimes I send things out, and that's it. Okay, moving on. What else happened to me today? I don't know. But this episode, I do know, is sponsored by Stamps.com. Stamps.com is perfect. Get on to the podcast episode.
It's news time. Delivering to you the news you didn't know about, the news you didn't care about, and the news you didn't know you cared about. With host, Chad White. Now, here's that host, Chad White.
Welcome back to News Time. I'm your host, Chad White, and this is the podcast news that you didn't know about or even wanted to hear. It all started with a tweet. That'll make sense soon, I promise. This week's story is about podcasting. Podcasting. Wait. Don't click or tap away just yet. I swear this won't be a few minutes of me giving you recommendations on shows that you should listen to instead of cereal or drivel made by your favorite YouTube personality. Although, I mean, come on, I've got so many shows you need to be listening to. How about, no, I said I wasn't going to do that. Podcasting used to be a niche part of the culture. Now it's an exploited part of the culture with too easy of an entry point and not any overhead whatsoever. But how can the Wild West of pop culture media get a hold of itself? Is it possible for an entire medium to police itself when it can't even decide when ads are becoming too obtrusive? Is this a third question? One way podcast media companies circumvented the traditional way of making money is by releasing shows directly to the consumer. Now I know what you're thinking. Movies and shows have been doing that for years. Between over-the-air TV and movie theaters and streaming, there's no shortage of how you can watch whatever delights your soul. But podcasting is quickly becoming a medium not just for the people, but also by the people. Cliche, yes I know. The reintroduction of fan-funded shows and sites via avenues like Patreon has led to increased listening, often annoying fandom, and overblown budgets. Don't let those deter you. It's not negative, even though I made it sound negative. Fandoms are great, even if they push newer, less involved listeners away from the show sometimes. And budgets. A lot of people want to hear what the guys of Doughboys have to say about Wendy's. Spoiler, they love it. Which brings me to this. Luminary, the latest podcast company, is aiming to be the next big powerhouse. Stop down, Gimlet. Plug your ears, Earwolf. Get real name correspondence, NPR. Luminary only came to be in 2018. Now it's honing in on everyone else's territory. At least it's trying to. And it's not the best influence. What? You knew where this is going, literary jokes and all. Earlier this year, Luminary let it known that the network is here to give listeners access to the stars. Here. Take a plethora of A-listers, add in a newfangled app, and sprinkle a little bit of that $100 million funding that they nabbed. That's Luminary. Co-founder and chief executive Matt Sachs wants it known they're using pages from Netflix's book, and they are not ashamed. Let's back up. A few years ago, Earwolf, the comedy podcast megagiant, started Howl, a subscription-based streaming service for podcasts that aim to be, and I swear this is their tagline, they touted up until its demise, the Netflix of podcasts. Very, very, so insanely stupid. Howl may have failed. That's all I have to say. Cool concept, cool name. That's all it offered. The app was buggy up until its demise earlier this year. The website was unresponsive and poorly coded, but the shows were great. I should say because Howl was folded into Stitcher Premium and everything's okay. Well, the name is dumber and the app is just as buggy as the last one, but the shows, all ad-free and many premium originals, are one of a kind. And for $5 a month too, which is a bargain. Luminary joins the ranks next to the comedy podcast king as a way for listeners to dive into the lives of their favorite famies. Not for $5, but for $8. The differences bleed into the business side too. For one, Luminary is paying hosts up front, plus giving them bonuses based on the amount of listeners they garner. Other podcast companies pay hosts based on ad revenue, and the amount is not that much. Podcasts are expected to gross a staggering $659 million in revenue in 2020. That's a 275% increase from 2015 and 110% from 2017, and the portion of that money is going to creators and hosts. Spotify notably joined the fray when it purchased Gimlet, one of the most popular providers, for $230 million, and it purchased crime podcast network Parcast, and it bought Anchor, the podcast creating app. All of this for a total of nearing $500 million. It too will offer ad-free and exclusive shows, a common theme for sure. Another common theme, they all offer the shows for free, eventually with ads to boot. After Luminary's big splash into the podcasting world, it had the worst week ever. Luminary's tweet was cute and also short-sighted, but their head was in the right place. 90 million monthly listeners for the podcast world is nothing to balk at. Yet, without the shows from the New York Times and Gimlet, they can't survive, right? Okay, hold. That's not going to stop them. What is going to stop them is not playing by the rules. The worst week ever continued well into the week next week when it was found that Luminary was not disclosing the numbers of listeners it was getting to its creators. That's a Netflix move if I never did see one. This, in addition to the lack of show notes, caused several other creators to pull their shows away from the platform. We're in a bad situation. Let's see what we can do to fix it. Show notes have been restored, so links posted along with the shows should be clickable now. Communication has gotten lots better too, but right now it feels like as if Luminary lost its chance to win the throne with the podcast games. Oh, and that's Game of Thrones. Luminary isn't the only new way for podcasters to make a good buck. Google has its own incubator, Spotify too. Then there's PodFund. Yes, PodFund has come to the rescue to invest into podcasts. They'll give creators money between $25,000 and $50,000 to make shows, so long as creators give revenue, touring, licenses, merch, and a small portion of the money they make back to PodFund. But it's only up to 15% for up to 5 years. All of this comes to shows and creators who have a proven track record for success. All are already successful and are probably going to continue to be successful. Podcasting is the fastest growing media industry medium. Luminary thinks it's possible to take $1 billion business to a whole nother level in terms on their own. But as we've seen before, it can come crashing down hard, fast, without any warning. You know what? To get to the conclusion of this episode, you're going to have to pay for and subscribe for our premium option, A+, C+, Comedy++. It's the same stuff, but with way more ads and no way to skip them. Okay, going to listen to the rest of the episode. Yeah.
All right, folks, that's it for today's episode of the podcast. Now listen to me jam out on this guitar, which is a real thing I do at the end of these podcast episodes. Yeah, that's my ode to Led Zeppelin.